queen, her own palace, armed soldiers at every door, and a document on the table that said, "Sign this or people will die."
That was Hawaii, January 17th, 1893. Not ancient history. A US-backed coup that overthrew a sovereign nation in broad daylight.
The American president investigated it personally and called it exactly what it was: illegal. He even tried to give Hawaii back. But the sugar barons who engineered the coup simply refused, declared their own republic, and waited for a friendlier president to finish the job. A population of 300,000 had already collapsed to under 40,000. A kingdom erased by disease, land theft, and 13 businessmen with a warship in the harbor. This is Historylands. Let's go back to where this story really starts, because the fall of the Hawaiian kingdom didn't happen overnight. It was the end result of a process that unfolded over more than a century. And understanding that process changes everything about how you see what happened in 1893. The Hawaiian Islands were first settled by Polynesian navigators arriving in waves between roughly 400 AD and 1200 AD. Extraordinary open ocean sailors who crossed thousands of miles of open Pacific using stars, ocean swells, and bird behavior as their only navigation tools. With no instruments and no maps, finding a chain of islands in the world's largest ocean. For centuries after those first settlements, Hawaii developed in complete isolation, building a complex society with its own legal systems, religious practices, agricultural traditions, and a sophisticated class structure headed by chiefs known as alii. By the time European contact arrived, historians now estimate Hawaii's population at somewhere between 300,000 and 700,000 people, making it one of the most densely populated island systems in the entire Pacific. That isolation ended on January 18, 1778, when British explorer Captain James Cook sailed into view of the Hawaiian Islands during his third Pacific voyage, becoming the first documented European to make contact. Cook's arrival seemed manageable at first. He established a trading relationship that functioned reasonably well for over a year. But his return in February 1779, forced by storm damage, ended with a confrontation on the beach that cost Cook his life on February 14, 1779. The man who opened Hawaii to the Western world died on Valentine's Day. What Cook's ships actually unleashed was far more destructive than any beach confrontation. His crews carried diseases, influenza, measles, typhoid, venereal disease, to which the Hawaiian population had zero immunity. And the biological consequences were catastrophic on a scale that is still difficult to fully comprehend even today. By 1800, just 22 years after Cook's arrival, the native population had already declined by nearly 50%. By 1820, the decline was 71%. By 1840, 84% of the pre-contact population was gone, not by warfare, but by contact itself. Here's a detail that rarely gets mentioned alongside these statistics. Some researchers now estimate the actual pre-contact population was closer to 700,000, not 300,000, meaning the true scale of the collapse may have been even larger than the numbers most history books use. Either way, the Hawaiian people were facing a demographic catastrophe of a magnitude that is almost impossible to process, and they were facing it while simultaneously trying to manage the growing presence of foreign traders, missionaries, and eventually plantation developers on their islands. Approximately 11 years after Cook's death, a chief named Kamehameha, nephew of the Big Island's supreme ruler, began a military campaign to unify all the Hawaiian Islands under a single authority. Using Western weapons, including cannons acquired through trade, and with the tactical advice of two Western sailors who joined his forces, Kamehameha fought a series of wars across the island chain that culminated in 1810 with the peaceful unification of all Hawaiian Islands. Under his rule, creating a kingdom that would be formally recognized as a sovereign nation by the major powers of the world. A fun fact worth pausing on: the name Kamehameha is known to millions of people worldwide, not through Hawaiian history classes, but through Dragon Ball Z, the finishing move that Goku fires with both hands. Charging energy with the cry of Kamehameha takes its name directly from this Hawaiian king. Creator Akira Toriyama reportedly confirmed the connection, and whether that makes you think differently about the attack or about the king. It is one of those strange bridges between ancient Pacific history and modern pop culture that nobody expects. Kamehameha I died in 1819, leaving behind a unified kingdom and a dynasty that would govern Hawaii for the next several decades, opening formal trade with Europe and the United States and building the institutional foundations of a functioning sovereign state. But two forces were already working silently against that sovereignty from the inside: the relentless demographic collapse of the native population and the growing appetite of outsiders for Hawaiian land. In 1835, a Massachusetts businessman named William Hooper leased 980 acres of Hawaiian land from King Kamehameha III to grow sugarcane, and that single lease set off a chain of events that would eventually consume the entire kingdom. Sugar turned out to be extraordinarily profitable in Hawaii's climate, and within 30 years, plantations were operating on all 4 major islands, producing wealth that attracted serious American investment and brought a growing population of foreign businessmen who had very different ideas about how land and governance should work. The critical cultural collision at the heart of this story is one that most accounts of Hawaiian history either rush past or explain poorly. Native Hawaiians did not have a concept of private land ownership. In Hawaiian tradition, land belonged collectively to the people and was managed by the ali, chiefs, on their behalf, a relationship between people and place that was fundamentally different from the Western legal framework of individual property ownership. When plantation owners began demanding legal title to the land they were leasing, they were not just asking for paperwork. They were asking Hawaii to restructure its entire relationship with the land, using a foreign framework that would systematically disadvantage Native Hawaiians in every legal proceeding that followed. The 1840 Constitution created a legislative branch with elected representatives chosen by popular vote, which sounds like democratic progress, but was in practice a mechanism for foreign takeover. Because the broad definition of eligible voters included non-citizen foreign residents, meaning the growing population of American plantation workers had direct political influence over Hawaiian governance almost immediately after the Constitution took effect. The Great Mahele of 1848 was Kamehameha III's attempt to resolve the growing land tensions by dividing Hawaii into thirds, 1/3 to the monarchy, 1/3 to the chiefs, and 1/3 to the common people. The intention was reasonable, but the execution was a quiet disaster because the commoner portion required individual legal claims to be filed within a set time period. And most Native Hawaiians neither understood the legal process nor saw any reason to formally claim land their families had lived on for generations. The concept of asserting legal ownership over land you already occupied was simply foreign to their way of thinking. When the filing period closed, vast tracts of unclaimed Hawaiian land became legally available for foreign purchase, and the purchases came fast. By 1850, the American-dominated legislature passed the Alien Land Ownership Act, allowing foreigners to buy Hawaiian land outright, and by 1890, approximately 75% of all privately held land in Hawaii was owned by foreign businessmen. The kingdom had legally transferred the foundation of its own sovereignty to people whose primary loyalty was to profit and whose political interests were directly opposed to Native Hawaiian self-determination. The Bayonet Constitution of 1887 is the moment when the mask came completely off. King Kalakaua had tried various strategies throughout his reign to push back against the steady erosion of royal authority, seeking trade deals with Britain and other European powers, building up the Hawaiian military, supporting Native Hawaiian culture that the plantation community generally dismissed.
In response, a group of mostly non-Hawaiian businessmen organized a private armed militia called the Honolulu Rifles, an all-white force, and used the direct threat of violence to make the king sign a new constitution they had written themselves, without any legislative process or popular vote. The Bayonet Constitution, named openly for how it was obtained, stripped the king of most actual governing power and restructured voting in ways that were surgically designed to remove Native Hawaiians from political participation. It raised income and property requirements high enough that approximately 3 out of 4 Native Hawaiians no longer qualified to vote, while simultaneously extending voting rights to white foreign residents who met property requirements even if they had never become Hawaiian. Citizens, Asian plantation workers, the majority of the actual labor force, were explicitly excluded entirely. It was a hostile corporate takeover executed through constitutional language. King Kalakaua died in January 1891 while traveling in California, and his sister, Liliuokalani, became the first and only queen of Hawaii on January 29th of that year. She understood immediately what the Bayonet Constitution represented and moved to replace it with one that would restore voting rights to Native Hawaiians and bring genuine governing authority back to the monarchy. She had the support of the majority of registered voters and a clear democratic mandate, but the Committee of Safety, a group of 13 men dominated by American sugar planters and lawyers, had already decided that a queen who wanted to govern her own country was an unacceptable threat to their business interests. On January 16, 1893, the Committee of Safety requested military assistance from John Stevens, the U.S. government minister to Hawaii, and Stevens ordered 162 armed American sailors and Marines from the USS Boston ashore, officially to protect American lives and property. Though no American lives or property faced any actual threat, the presence of those troops was the decisive factor, because it signaled clearly that any armed resistance to the coup would mean direct military confrontation with the United States. Queen Liliuokalani surrendered under formal protest rather than watch her people die, appealing directly to the U.S. government to investigate and reverse what had been done. What followed is one of the most revealing chapters in American political history. President Grover Cleveland ordered an independent investigation led by former Congressman James Blount, and the resulting Blount report was completely unambiguous. The overthrow was illegal. The U.S. minister had conspired with the coup plotters, and the American military presence had been the decisive factor. Cleveland went before Congress and stated plainly that the United States had committed an act of war against a friendly sovereign nation, and asked for authorization to restore the Queen. Congress refused. The plantation oligarchy simply waited, and when William McKinley, who actively supported annexation, won the 1896 election, the endgame began. Even then, formal annexation hit a significant obstacle. A petition signed by more than 21,000 Native Hawaiians, representing the clear majority of the Native adult population, was delivered to the U.S. Senate opposing annexation. And a formal treaty failed to get the required 2/3 Senate majority. McKinley's administration responded by bypassing the treaty process entirely, using a joint resolution that only required a simple majority vote. The timing was not coincidental. The Spanish-American War had just begun, and Pearl Harbor's value as a Pacific naval base had suddenly become the overwhelming argument for annexation. On July 7, 1898, Hawaii became a U.S. territory, and Sanford Dole, first cousin once removed of the man who would later found the Dole Food Company, became its first territorial governor. The Big Five corporations that emerged from the plantation system then controlled Hawaiian economic and political life for the next half-century with a grip that was essentially total. By 1920, just 5 companies, Alexander and Baldwin, Castle and Cook,
Brewer, American Factors, and Theo Davies controlled 94% of Hawaii's sugar crop, along with dominant positions in banking, shipping, utilities, and retail. Workers who actually harvested the sugar lived in plantation camps with company housing, company stores, and wages set entirely by their employers, a system that was legal, profitable, and almost completely unaccountable. The Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, killed approximately 2,400 servicemen and civilians and pulled the United States into World War II, but it also set in motion the forces that would eventually end the plantation era. The military placed Hawaii under martial law immediately after the attack, controlling nearly every aspect of civilian life. Fingerprinting all residents over age 6, rationing food and gasoline, censoring all mail and news until October 1944. The war itself brought tens of thousands of mainland Americans to Hawaii, fundamentally changing the demographic and cultural balance of the islands. The decade after the war brought organized labor to Hawaii with a force the Big Five had never encountered. A series of major strikes in the sugar and pineapple industries in the late 1940s, organized by the International Longshoremen's and Warehousemen's Union, broke the plantation system's control over its workforce for the first time. In 1954, a coalition of labor unions, Japanese-American war veterans, and progressive Democrats swept the territorial elections and ended the Big Five's political control in a single election cycle, an event Hawaiians call the Revolution of 1954, though it barely registers in mainland American history books. Statehood followed in 1959 when President Eisenhower signed the Hawaii Admission Act, and Hawaii officially became the 50th U.S. state on August 21st. But statehood resolved nothing for the native Hawaiian community. In 1993, on the 100th anniversary of the overthrow, Congress passed and President Bill Clinton signed the Apology Resolution, a formal acknowledgement that the overthrow of the Hawaiian Kingdom was illegal, that U.S. agents actively participated in it, and that Native Hawaiians never voluntarily surrendered their sovereignty or their claim to their lands. The Apology Resolution is an extraordinary document, the United States government formally admitting it helped steal a country. But it came with no land restoration, no reparations, and no mechanism for Native Hawaiian self-governance. In the words of many Hawaiian sovereignty advocates, it was an acknowledgement without accountability, a confession with no consequence. The Hawaii sovereignty movement continues to this day. And the question of what justice actually looks like after 130 years of dispossession remains genuinely unresolved. The next time you see a travel advertisement for Hawaii, the turquoise water, the white sand, the flowers, and the music, it is worth holding two things in your mind at once. The paradise is real, and the price that was paid for it is also real, paid by a people whose queen surrendered not out of weakness, but out of love, choosing her people's lives over her own throne, writing letters to Congress that were never answered, watching her kingdom become a territory and then a state while she was still alive to see it. Liliuokalani died in 1917. Hawaii became a state in 1959. She did not live to see either the full annexation or the apology. Some debts take longer than a lifetime to even acknowledge. This is History Lens.